Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Rutgers Graduate School of Education Summer Series for Educators on Equity and Excellence in Remote Learning. Tonight's session, our fourth, focuses on supporting students with learning disabilities in the remote classroom. As with all of our sessions, which are available at the link below this window, we'll only be scratching the surface of this complex topic in our 1 hour together, but we hope to provide reflections, ideas, and resources that will be helpful as we move into this unprecedented school year. It's important to mention that in this session, we'll hear from teachers about what they've found to be successful in their own classrooms, but the session's not intended to be taken as legal guidance. As you watch, please take part in the YouTube chat, where you'll find educators from all over New Jersey and beyond. We'll be taking questions from there, and it's also a good place for you to share your own insights and experiences with each other. If the chat isn't appearing live for you, please just refresh your page. Our moderators for this evening are Dr. Nicholas Solomon and Dr. Judy Harrison. Dr. Solomon is principal at Franklin Middle School at Hamilton Street campus in the Franklin Township Public Schools in New Jersey. Over his 18 years in education, he's been a special education teacher, dean of students, and a vice principal. And he's also a part-time lecturer at Rutgers University, teaching urban education and students, communities, and social justice. Dr. Judy Harrison is an associate professor of special education in the Department of Educational Psychology at the GSE at Rutgers. She conducts research on interventions for students with ADHD. She's taught and counseled students with disabilities for 23 years. Now I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Solomon.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we begin our discussion on approaches to teaching well in remote settings, with a focus on students with disabilities. Our students need us more than ever before, and we have to develop an effective way to support them through virtual platforms. Being a former special education teacher myself, and now as an administrator, I understand the challenges that we face with effectively teaching our students traditionally. And now we must find effective strategies to do it remotely. We must work together and continue to share ideas, because our students that receive special education have it harder than ever before. For example, when we first started our remote learning in my district back in the spring, I had the opportunity to bring a Chromebook and a hotspot to one of our students who received special education. And when I got there, my colleague and I, we arrived to the door, and the student actually had a Chromebook. So right there, the first indication was there was a language barrier. And I had a student who also was in special education. When I start to ask what the issue was, because I was told that she needed a Chromebook, the mom was trying to explain to me that she didn't know how to get to our school website or how to find the assignments. And so the student came, and I worked with the student to try to show her the school website. But I immediately realized that the student did not know how to spell. The student struggled in accessing or working the website correctly to find the assignments. And it just bothered me that we have students, and especially students in special education, that we couldn't effectively reach them. So no matter what strategies that we had in place, there was a barrier there. So we need to find a way together to work with our students, especially in special education. And I hope tonight we're able to come up with some effective strategies that we can share with all of you. So with that being said, I will turn this over to my co-moderator, Dr. Judy Harrison, to introduce our guest panelists.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you, Dr. Solomon. You are correct. It's been quite a challenge. So I'm excited to introduce our panel of special education teachers who can talk to us about their experiences and give some advice. So I'm going to start with Orion Nolan. Orion is a special education teacher in Manville Public Schools, where she teaches in 3rd grade. She teaches in an inclusive setting. She's also taught in a variety of other special ed settings from 3rd grade to 8th grade, including multiple disability and language and learning disability classes. She graduated from Rutgers, good job, with a bachelor's degree in psychology and earned a master's degree from the Graduate School of Education in 2012 with a concentration in special education. Next is Colleen Begley. Colleen has been teaching special education math at Franklin Middle School at the Hamilton Street campus in Franklin Township for 5 years. She's taught in many special ed settings, including 6th to 8th grade resource rooms and 8th grade LLD and ICS. She has a master's degree in special education, working with students with high incidence disabilities. And our third panelist is Janelle Powell. Janelle has been a special ed teacher for 27 years. She's currently a special ed teacher at Highland Park High School. She teaches math also, including Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and math support in a resource room setting. Janelle holds a New Jersey certificate in early intervention, and she works as a developmental interventionist doing independent contract work, including ABA, and has done that for the past 12 years. So let's get started. Orion, I'm going to start with you with our first question. So after teaching remotely for 3 years, or 3 months, thank God it's not 3 years, right? For 3 months, what was the highlight of your experience? What did you learn?
Well, I would say the most thing that was successful for me during this time was the ability to work one-on-one with my students for an extended amount of time. So, in school, in the classroom, we typically do a lot of small group lessons and maybe some one-on-one work. But with remote learning, through setting up meetings with parents and students to get that time, I was able to individually work one-on-one to complete assignments and meet their needs.
Excellent. Janelle, do you have something to contribute?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. For me, I had been sort of pushing in more and more, trying to learn more technology for the past few years. Being forced in that remote situation pushed me even more to learn different techniques and different tools out there that I probably would not have resourced had it not been for this remote learning situation. That was really the highlight for me. It was very eye-opening, and yeah, that really took me over the top with the technology and the stuff that was out there that I had no idea.
Excellent. And Colleen, what are your thoughts?
One of the biggest highlights for me is just the understanding that no students learn the same way. And that became so evident in this remote learning experience, between the students that wanted to log in and join me live or the students who would much rather prefer to watch a video recording. It really highlighted that we have to be open to working with students of all needs and reaching out to those and their different ways of learning.
Yeah. All right. How about our next question? So, Orion, talk to me about effective strategies. What worked?
Sorry. So for me, one of the things that really worked was providing my students with a daily checklist of all of their assignments, so that they can just effectively keep track of what they were responsible for completing for the day. Along with that, I also included a live Google Meets link, so that at any point when they were working, they were able just to click right onto that link from their checklist and pop into a Google Meet with me to get any kind of assistance that they need with whatever that they were working on at the time. Also working with parents is really, was super beneficial. Just having parents on the same page as you, meeting with them, conversating with them, letting them know your expectations, really, really was effective during this time.
Okay. Colleen.
One of the first things that I found to be so helpful was creating a daily check-in. And it had nothing to do with the content that I was teaching for the day. It was just a very quick a simple check-in to say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling today? And then a chance for them to write, is there anything that I should know? And it really helped to personalize the instruction that I was providing. Whether a student says, I'm good to go, or they had a technology question, or saying that they were too anxious last night and they couldn't sleep, could they finish the work tomorrow? It really allowed me to reach out to those students in particular, provide them the support that they needed. Another instructional strategy that worked out really well was just the providing of student choice between different activities, games, multiple means of instruction.
Excellent. Janelle?
Yeah, that's. I was reflecting a little bit on Dr. Solomon's conversation about going to the person's home and having the communication, especially with the technology issues. One of the things that I found successful in dealing with that is literally working on the technology first. Actually having lessons surrounding how do you manipulate all those things that we use and we assume that it's easy for our kids to just click on it and do. The actual going in and teaching those lessons first really was helpful. Even if it took a little longer, the benefit of it was tremendous. So that was really, really successful for me. And also utilizing my paras and TAs who I love and having them be able to, in breakout rooms, take a smaller group, take someone who's struggling, have those conversations and utilizing them. We all have those opportunities, have these great support systems, and using those to get more individualized help was really important. The other one, which I'm going to talk about later, which is the Nearpod and the CAMI, and I'll go a little bit more. Those were so successful in helping with constant check-ins with our kids as well.
Okay. So along the same lines, let's talk about next year. So I suspect that you guys worked really hard to figure out what worked this year. So are there some new things that you're going to do next year? Something different? Orion?
So going into the new school year, I've been working with my co-teacher and want to continue to work with my co-teacher to kind of build a more virtual co-teaching model, something that, where we can both live, support our students live, set clear expectations for them, hold more small groups, like Janelle touched on, using the Zoom and the breakout rooms to hold, more small group instruction, guided reading groups, and so on and so forth. And just continuing to provide them with the schedule and give them individual meetings. And just, I learned that when you provide more real-time feedback, students tend to be more engaged in the work that they're doing. So continuing with that, as well as create an even stronger parent-teacher partnership.
Good. Colleen?
One of the things that my counterparts and I are trying to create are those daily agendas and week at a glance looks to help the students with organization. We've also been looking at how are some of the ways that we can show the students at the beginning of the year how to use these digital tools, as Janelle had mentioned. But the biggest thing for me that I've been researching this summer was, how am I going to be doing note-taking for next year? Especially as a middle school math teacher, how am I going to provide chances for students to take notes, show their work? I've been using interactive notebooks over the last 5 years. So now I've been able to research some of the different tools I can use to make digital interactive notebooks where I can incorporate videos and infographics and spaces to show work. So it's a work in progress, but it's been really exciting for me to try something new.
All right. Janelle?
Okay, so for me, I'm going to go back to the technology piece. That was, you're talking about the new things I'm excited about. I am doing a planning unit. I have a great ICS teacher I work with who we're planning this whole unit on all these different resources that we're using. So I'm excited about implementing that and working with her to make it fit for mainstream kids as well as my students, and make it attached with these great videos that are also, we can use instructional videos along the way. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Excellent. You guys have a lot of really good ideas. We learned on the spot, didn't we? Okay. So Everyone's favorite question. I think we've all learned about instructional technology in a really quick manner, right? All of us. So tell me, start with Orion, tell me your favorite supplemental technology.
So during those 3 months, utilized Screencastify to record chapters in books, to do read alouds for students. I've also used it to help parents in navigating tools on Chrome or Google Classroom. Another thing that my co-teacher and I used was Google Classroom. Google Classroom definitely was a biggie for us, utilizing folders to keep it organized, assigning specific students messages, so you don't have to necessarily send a message out to all students. If you're just trying to reach one or two, you can assign a message specifically to them. That's been really helpful. And then I believe that Google Classroom, when this all happened, kind of updated their system and allowed for there to be a grade book. And so that was super useful for us with all the assignments and trying to keep track of who's completing what assignments, along with all the Google apps for education. Sheets, slides, docs were all beneficial when creating online assignments for the kids. We also utilized Flipgrid, which allowed students to record themselves teaching something or record themselves explaining something, but it also allowed for the students to be interactive as well, because they could see the videos that the other kids had recorded, respond to them, make comments to them. So it was a way for kids to still feel connected with one another, which they really enjoyed. And then another thing that I kind of dove into towards the end was the whole Bitmoji classroom craze, and just creating different avenues for my students. And I found that the Bitmoji classrooms were definitely a lot more engaging for the students. They were excited to see other teachers' Bitmojis. It was a more engaging way for them to gain access to their assignments. And so although Google Classroom is a great tool, sometimes it can become very confusing to find assignments for, especially for special education students. So utilizing the Bitmoji classroom or even the Google Sheets, where I listed all the student specific assignments, you can actually link the assignments directly into there. So when they click on it, it takes them right to the assignment instead of them having to navigate through Google Classroom to find them. And so I was able to do that with the Bitmoji classrooms. And it kind of made it fun and exciting because I got all the other teachers in my district on board and I got their Bitmojis to include into the classroom. I also created a virtual library for them to do their 20 minutes of reading. And so just little things like that that keeps students in general engaged, but especially, you know, special ed student that needs that extra motivation to want to do the work that's assigned to them.
Tell me a little bit more about Bitmoji Classroom. So do you have, what does it look like? When you look at the screen, what do you see?
So what you see is essentially you use Google Slides to create it. And it's a background of a classroom and you use all the clip art to create your own virtual classroom. So you have your board, you have your small group table, you have a little library, you can have bookshelves, and all the little clip arts and all the little pieces, you can add a link to them so that when they click on the picture, it takes them right to where they need to be. So for example, if you clicked on my image, my Bitmoji image, it would take you to a Google Meets Hangout or a Zoom link that would take them directly to me.
Awesome. That's fun. Colleen?
So I would definitely agree that the Google Apps for Education were one of the beginning pieces that I used. We used a lot of Google Docs where students could type out their works, especially using different applications to show equation editors and showing how the students were solving their equations. I used Google Forms for formative assessments, whether it was just my quick daily check-in or little quizzes here and there. Google Slides is what I've been using right now to create those digital interactive notebooks. And what I love about Slides is you have the opportunity to upload a video. You can upload the images. You can provide the text box for students to show their work. And I found it to be so helpful that all of your work is going to be in one area and you don't have to worry about clicking between the different tabs. I noticed that with a lot of my students with varying needs, they had such a hard time with navigation of a computer. And when you have all those tabs start opening at the top of your screen, even for us, we get overwhelmed sometimes. For a student, it's much more so. Another tool that I only just started using Breakout Rooms. We use Google Meet at Franklin, and Google Meet is now going to start having different options to have breakout rooms. So having that opportunity to have those small groups, that was definitely something new and something that I enjoyed. The last piece that I wanted to share is I loved having the opportunity to have games. So whether it was Gimkit, Kahoot, Quizzies, all of those, my middle schoolers are very competitive. So having that option where you can play a game but still complete the content, but it also provided that peer interaction. So when I had students who were logging in and joining me live play the game, they were playing with their friends in the classes. But also the students that maybe joined in later, they could say, oh, so-and-so played this game. Well, I got to beat them. I got to get a higher score. I'm going to play twice. So it really provided a little bit of just a social interaction of just being able to compete and be teens and kids.
For what it's worth, my university students love Kahoot also. So it's an excellent tool. All right, Janelle.
Okay, I'm going to try to hit some of those questions along the way. But I did, like I said, I really learned a lot. I have so much more to learn, like we all do, being thrusted into this situation. So I'm going to answer to the best of my ability. One thing that came to us in the spring when this all happened was CAMI. And as a math teacher, I struggled with how am I going to see my students' work. Colleen, I know you understand. How am I going to follow along what they're doing? Because for us, especially with students who may have issues and need extra help, we work off their faces. We work off seeing their work. We get those cues from those things. CAMI allows you to do that. You can upload any document, even if it's a PDF, it can change it into a document if you need to. You can upload your own documents, all those sheets that you all have worked on for years that you perfected. And you're like, what do I do with this now? You can actually take CAMI, scan it, upload it, and have your students write in it. They can write via a pen, they can text box, they can put equations in. You can share your screen in Google and Zoom and work through the problems with them and talk them through it. And even in Google, if they're working on something, you can actually write on their document with them in those one-on-one sessions and make corrections in a different color. In CAMI, you can verbally speak to them on a microphone and leave a message circling a specific item that they may be struggling with. Those things I found so useful for my students because it was very individualized when I went back to go back and look at the work. I can change the color to a different color so they can see, leaving their errors next to it because it's important that they see where they went wrong and then have the correct equation written next to it. It was really useful. And our district actually extended it. I have a great supervisor and it was wonderful because we now have the full CAMI extension, which is really cool because what happens is for our kids, when I set it up in Google Classroom, an assignment, sometimes you have to click, open a CAMI. No, I can set it up as a CAMI assignment. So when they click the assignment, it opens up automatically for them in this great tool. And they don't have to take those extra steps. We could lose our kids in those extra steps. That was my big win. I loved it. Someone had a question about a high engagement, right? How do we keep our kids who we may lose a little bit along the way in this type of situation? Like our kids will be lost right now, right? Because we don't have, the interaction. But we went to another wonderful session that we had, and there was this one item that we learned called Nearpod. And I really took the time out. I had a colleague that worked with me this summer and I used it over the summer with my students and it is amazing. What Nearpod allows you to do, you could take those wonderful Google Slides or those PowerPoints if you use Word, and you can transfer that into Nearpod. Once you transfer that into Nearpod, it allows you to have a classroom setting like this and pop it up. Everyone logs in and you all work together. You go in, you put an assignment, they're right with you. You flip the page, you control it. You can go to a page and say, now I'm going to quiz you on what I just said. And it'll come up, who got it wrong, who's with you. This can be every slide. It could be every 2 slides. It could be however you want to do it. There's matching. They can draw. They can draw on it. You can see what their results are. I highly recommend Nearpod. It is amazing and it's very interactive. That also could be beneficial for our nonverbal. Someone had a question about the nonverbal. If you have nonverbal, we're working on visual. We're working on, which I love, the Bitmoji, Orion said it, the clicking on the pictures, right? And that would work great for nonverbal students, right? So you'd be able to click on something. You can do that in Nearpod. You could set up a Google Classroom that's nonverbal with pictures. And you could say, click on the right one, and you can see the result. So I really highly recommend Nearpod. Someone asked to talk about Screencastify a little bit more. Screencastify is another free tool you can get. Like the ones that I've mentioned are free. However, as anything, if you pay for it, you get a little bit more. Screencastify allows you to tape your lesson. So for me as a math person, being able to go over in CAMI, a lesson and go through it and tell them what to do and present that, have them practice it, and then present it. It's just something that they can go back to. It's my lesson, because a lot of things that we find, I don't know if you all have that same issue. You can go and look for things for our kids, special education. They're good, but they're not quite what we need, right? Because we need more steps. We need to go back a little deeper. We need to think a little bit more about what the questions are before they have the questions. So to be able to make my own video on Screencastify, not being seen, because I'm good with not being seen, but it's just my screen. And the kids can use that and utilize that later. It's great. It's 5 minutes long. You can get it longer if your district pays, but so what? You get cut off at 5 minutes, go back and do part 2. We'll figure that out. Desmos and math. Desmos is amazing. I'm still learning so much more about that. But what you can do is you can set your classroom up in Desmos. Now you have to go not with the Desmos calculator that we usually use. It's called Teaching Desmos, and it's a resource you'll see later on. They're going to have all these resources for you. But you can pick any subject from adding and subtracting integers to solving quadratic equations. And they'll have all these really cool interactive activities for your kids to do that are step-by-step in slides. And the information will be reported right back to you. All of these tools give you data, right? We live on data, especially with our students, but I highly recommend Desmos. You can set up your class. And the other thing about Desmos is you can pick levels. You can pick the level for the kids who are more advanced lesson or kids who are just starting off, parallel to like Khan Academy, but Desmos is much more interactive, I think. Of course, Quizlet, you guys are, and Edpuzzle. Going back to your videos, you can take your video that you've learned, and you know how we always wonder, are y'all listening? Y'all really listening? So you can take your video and you can add questions. So you can start your video and stop it, and Edpuzzle puts up questions. It could be matching, it could be short answer, it could be multiple choice, and it could be your video, or you can choose from the videos that are out there and you can tailor it towards your kids' needs. And I think that's important. That also records the answers and gives you data automatically. Nearpod gives you data automatically. They email you a whole spreadsheet of percentages, what they got wrong, it's amazing. So those things are tools that I know that are going to help me, especially with math, especially with interactions in the fall. And I think I talked about them all, and I hope I answered questions. I'm trying to, CAMI, is it free? Okay, CAMI is free. It's a CAMI extension. You go to the Chrome store. However, if you don't get the paid version, you'd have to go through teaching the technology on teaching the kids how to get to CAMI or how to open up an assignment in CAMI. And it can be done. It's easier to have it if they open the Google Classroom, but if you take the time to do that unit lesson, and I do a lesson where I teach them how to find it, they go in it, and I teach a lesson on practicing how to use it. It works. Okay, so do you personally pay?
Oh.
No, I wish I had that kind of money to pay. I'm a teacher. I'm thankful. My district has paid for a few resources. One that we all seem to really care about and works for us is CAMI. So we do have the CAMI extension paid for, but if it's not paid for, you still can use it, not with all of its tools, but it can still be very beneficial to just try it and see if you can get your kids to find it and work with them and see how that works. It may be more efficient for the high school or middle school, but yeah.
So Janelle,
Yes.
did you say that technology was a problem for you in the beginning?
It wasn't that it was a problem because I for the past few years, like I said, I've been trying to implement it more and be more diligent, but this thrusted me into a way that I said, I'm teaching these math classes, and I need to figure out a way to do it. And, my supervisor provided a really great math workshop, and I just signed up for different things and I just played with it. And it's a little fearful for all of us. I totally understand that. I'm with you all. However, I think that if you just push yourself into it and try, and just ask questions. There's a YouTube video on how to do all of these things. I watch YouTube videos all the time.
Good job.
I don't take up everybody's time. So
no, that's good. So good job. So Orion, you said that you could talk to us about related service providers. That's something that I know that we've all talked about and struggled with. How do we get our related service providers to work with our students virtually? So
so for me, I chose to work hand in hand with like our speech therapist per se, getting in contact with the students. So that was the biggest issue at first, was our speech therapists or our related service providers actually getting in contact with the parents to be able to sign the release forms and the release documentations in order for them to be virtual and conducting their lessons. So I would just say that the biggest thing is for the teacher to work hand in hand with that related service provider, and then get in contact with the parent in order to set up a regular scheduled meeting. So for example, like what I did, I had my speech therapist really struggled with getting in touch with one of my students. However, I was in touch with her every single day. So what I had our speech therapist do was just pop into one of our Google Meets. And then what I had the student do was then go grab mom so that she can now get on, because she wasn't picking up her cell phone. She wasn't answering emails. And so we just kind of coordinated it that way. And then we sent out a virtual document on DocuSign for the parents to sign so that they could receive the services virtually. And then they set up a schedule. And then I tried to make sure that I stayed on top of my students. I had their schedules of when their services were being provided, when they were supposed to log on with their related services teacher. And I made sure that I would go on with them and say, hey, now it's 10 a.m. You need to go log on with Ms. Tanko or Ms. Lori and receive your services. So that's just the biggest thing. You want to make sure if your related service providers are struggling, just try to support them as much as possible and bridge that gap for them and the parents and the students.
Excellent. Okay, so our next question is another one that I've heard a lot from teachers as we've moved through this COVID experience. So talk to me a little bit about your students' IEP goals and how you, what did you do to meet your IEP goals, Orion?
It's okay. So I am a teacher in a third grade inclusion classroom. And because it's inclusion classroom, typically special ed students are supposed to, with support, be able to keep up with the third grade curriculum. So what I tried to do going into the year as my students' annual reviews came up was give them goals that I know that they needed to work on, but that also was in alignment with what we were doing daily. So it helps, it makes it more efficient so that the students can have the maximum amount of time to work on these specific goals. And it's already integrated into what they're doing. So it's not taking away from what they're doing. It's just adding to what they're doing. So when we switched over to virtual learning, it was very easy to maintain them working on those same goals, because we just kind of carried over what we were doing into the classroom to now we're doing it virtually online in different modes using Google Slides or Screencastify or whatever. And so it was very easy for them to continue to work on their goals and for me to assess their goals in that way. And then where students were struggling or maybe needed a little bit more assistance, definitely working one-on-one with them to give them that specific instruction on those specific goals and just kind of practicing it with them one-on-one. And just like I said, the biggest thing, especially going into the new school year, is just trying to make sure that those, no matter what special education setting you're in, trying to make sure that those goals align with what you're already going to be doing daily is beneficial.
Excellent. Colleen?
My experience was very similar along those lines. The only piece that I really want to add is when working on specifically the goals that you're reporting the data back on, picking the technology tools that the students are more comfortable with. So in those examples, when I was working on just the goals with those students, I was meeting maybe in a small group setting or one-to-one with those students, but I was using Google Docs or Google Slides, something that was easy to type in, easy to navigate, that the students had the most familiarity with that resource. This way, it took a little bit of the stress off of trying to navigate a technology piece as well as the academic piece for the goal.
Unmute. Good. Okay. Janelle?
I think that I'm going to refer to my ICS class. What I did was I did a lot of individual time with my students in this remote learning situation. So if they needed some extra assistance, I would set up maybe a Google Meet or a Google Zoom or a Zoom privately with the students and give them some guidance. I also met with students and their parents, and that was very, very helpful. That was the biggest piece on trying to modify things. Also, going back and adjusting some of the assignments and giving some kids a little bit of more support in certain assignments that were given and changing them specifically for them. Maybe adding an extra step, showing that first step in an equation or showing different things was very, very helpful.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about inclusion. So sometimes our students struggle to be part of the group when we're face to face, right? So now we're virtual and they can hide. So talk to me about what techniques you guys use to keep our students engaged in the large group discussions. Orion?
So I would say that, moving into this new school year, especially if you're in an ICR or ICS situation, just implementing a true co-teacher model, whether it's you have one teacher instructing the lesson and then you have the other teacher, monitoring the chat and answering questions that way, letting them know that they don't have to necessarily speak live, but they can type and have that comfortability of just typing in the chat and having their questions. And then also taking a step back, I think, is important too. And, speaking, individually with each one of your special education students and allowing them that private space to voice their concerns, any questions that they might have, any feelings of nervousness or whatever might come up. And then just addressing that with them one-on-one, coming up with strategies, coming up with maybe, private hand signals to let them know, okay, now you need to jump in and, participate a little more, or using a point system. My daughter is in kindergarten, and one thing that really worked well for her classroom was Class Dojo, and her teacher would assign points for kids who participated and would get rewards at the end of the week. Although that's a kindergarten classroom, things like that do work for older students, and especially for special education students, where it just kind of gives them an incentive to work towards.
Good job.
And I just wanted to address the question too, that it's a struggle to get kids to log in every single day, right? And in order facilitate that. Sometimes you just have to go above and beyond. So like I had my students that logged in and checked in with me daily and would stay with me for hours. But then I had a student that was MIA. And so it took a lot of support. You know, I had to rely on my team members to make phone calls when I couldn't. I had to rely on my principal to reach out to, you know, the parents to try to come up with a plan. And it sometimes does take a lot of work, but I find that it's important to make that connection with the students that are not logging on. And it literally took me, you know, every morning at 11 a.m., I called mom on her cell phone. She got her child up on the cell phone and I would walk him through, go get the Chromebook. Now log on to the Chromebook, go into your checklist, click on the link, get on a virtual chat with me. Now we can hang up the cell phone. And then I would keep that student on with me as long as I could to try to get as much work done as I could. I mean, really that it takes a lot of effort, but they're worth it.
Good job. Excellent. Colleen.
One of the strategies that I used to engage some of those students that did not feel as comfortable in talking in the large group settings was to use those breakout rooms. Just like we would in a classroom, the kid who doesn't want to participate in the big full classroom, he doesn't want to raise his hand, put those students in the small group. And then you can highlight, as my colleagues have said, just highlight that if you don't feel comfortable coming off camera, type in the chat. I know as a teacher, sometimes it can be frustrating teaching to the screen of icons, but if the students are comfortable, let them participate in the way that they feel the most comfortable, whether it's online through the chat or coming off camera and speaking out loud.
Forgot to unmute. Janelle.
All right. One thing I'm going back to my ICS class, you have to set up those norms. I think having the tolerance, teaching tolerance and understanding in the beginning and setting up those norms in that whole experience, just like you would in your classroom, and kids begin to understand what's acceptable and what's not, and everyone's comfortable. I know for my students, they begin to feel comfortable voice their questions and they don't feel embarrassed. It has to be start in the beginning in that way. Also setting up spaces for success. We actually make questions or give questions to some of our special ed students that we know that they can answer or that they would feel extremely proud about, and set up that comfort zone so they begin to feel it's a safe space in that whole setting. They have to feel like it's a safe space. I think that's important, just as it would be in person, to set it up that way as well if we're in a Zoom or remotely. Looking to pair your students with students that will not do their work, but do it with them. And also, if you have a breakout room, mix it with special ed students as well. Don't just have one group of kids, and you're strategic with it, right? You want to put them in a place where they're comfortable with that person, and that person is going to invite them to join, not to just put them to the side. Someone had a question, which is a tough one, about what about students who have severe, disabilities and parents who have to work, and how does that work? I'm assuming that those classrooms have the right amount of paras and TAs. Again, I will go back and say they have to be utilized. One thing that I did do was I made sure that they were in my Google Classroom as teachers, and my lessons were shared prior, so they knew exactly what they were going to do. It has to be where when you set up a breakup room or you have them working one-on-one, because you're going to need that one-on-one for that population a little bit more, it's there. And having them being able to share their screen and maybe run through the lesson with the nonverbal student with pictures and icons. I can't wait to learn more about Bitmoji. I love that. Orion put out there, but to be able to have them do that in a one-on-one setting, that may be successful and helpful after you've taught the broad lesson. The breakout room with the one-on-one with pictures and maybe some pointing is extremely helpful.
Great. Okay, our final question, and when we get through this question, then I will summarize. So, Orion, when you think about what we've learned about different households, I think we've learned a lot about our students through this process. So we know that different households have different needs, different situations, right? We've learned a lot. So what did you learn or what did you do to collaborate with your parents that was most successful?
For me, it was just to stay in constant contact with them, and to just make sure that we were all on the same page. Email, phone, weekly newsletters, daily checklists. We utilized, me and my co-teachers utilized Class Tag, which I forgot to mention earlier, which is it's basically like a kid version of Facebook, right? So it has a news feed, you can post pictures, there's an area for messaging, and it's free. And it's, the parents love it. They can direct message any of the teachers that are attached. We can send out mass messages to parents or individual messages to parents, and just staying in constant contact. Another thing that my co-teachers and I did, who I love because they're awesome, we set up whole parent meeting. So we would hold like almost like a back to school night or for the parents, where we would come on a Google Meet or a Zoom. We'd have a small presentation on expectations, and then we would leave it open for question and answering for the parents, just so that they can have their concerns met, but also hear other parents' concerns so that they can also feel like, we're in this together. They're not alone. Other parents share their same struggles. And just, like I said, just making sure that they know that we're a team and we're working together, and just utilizing, like I said before, utilizing my coworkers, utilizing my third grade team, utilizing, for the families that are English language learners who don't speak English, utilizing the translators and my administrators to make sure that we were just in constant contact and we were together and on the same page, and expectations were clear so that our kids' needs could be met.
Colleen?
We talk so much about meeting the emotional needs of our students, but also what I found to be most beneficial in communicating with parents is reaching out to their emotional needs for support as well. The parents are having a hard time navigating the technology, navigating the classwork. So by adding in just that little piece of personal communication in the signature of my email, how best can I help you to make the most of this remote learning situation? Some of the best advice came from parents, whether it was providing self-grading activities so the students knew their results, or providing resources for parents. That all came from parent communication on what do they need to make the most out of this situation. So just having that quality, compassionate conversations with the families as well.
Janelle?
I love what Colleen said, because I was going to say, sometimes we're afraid, or people are afraid to reach out to parents. I don't know. You have to have that contact, whether it's a shout out email. I didn't see such and such in Zoom this week. I missed them. Is there anything I can do? That is so important. And honestly, no parent wants their child to not be successful. So it's important to send out those emails. It's important to say, you know what, let me sit down with you in a Zoom meeting, and with your child, and let's talk about what we can do to organize together and make sure that your child is on the same page that I'm on. Because sometimes I had a student who had no idea how to read the schedule, very high functioning, was great in the math class, but just could not figure it all out. Sitting down with the person and going through that was very helpful, and the parent.
Excellent. So that was our last question. First, I want to say that you guys have made me really proud to be a special educator. And I'm supposed to summarize everything you said. And all I can think is, we're special ed teachers, right? And we're good at this. And this is what we do. Because what I heard you say is, in a very difficult time, you did everything that we do, everything you know to do as a special educator. You used things, I could talk all day long about best practices, right? But you listed them, and you did those things in a very complex, remote situation. So thank you. And thanks for sharing with others out there. I guess some of the things that we should highlight is the need for structure that you talked about, how to reach out to parents, how to reach students who are not engaging. It was excellent what you talked about. Those are things that we struggle with in typical times, right? So I'm really proud of you. And that's where I am at this point. Nick?
Hello, everyone, again. again, I just want to echo those same sentiments. Colleagues, excellent job in sharing all of those useful resources. But I do, before I summarize, I was kind of just watching the chat and I saw one question I do want to ask before we transition in closing. And that goes to related services. Can someone, again, you can just jump right in. Can someone just comment on how do we best collaborate with related services on online platforms? I know many of our students need OT, PT, speech. Any ideas that you want to throw out there for our audience? Colleen, you gonna start first?
Oh, okay.
So the biggest thing for collaborating across the school building with related services, other staff members, is just having that consistency in the tools that are maybe being used. So for example, if your school uses Zoom or your school uses Google Meet, as Janelle said, maybe have those times where you teach all those features. This way, when you do have those students in those one-to-one situations where they're receiving their related services, they know how to use those tools. They know how to unmute, to start the camera, to participate in the chat. This way, when we do get them all together in one place, we can make the most of that time.
Janelle?
I love what she said, and I just wanted to just say having that meeting and meeting with those people and set them structured, scheduled times when they have the times, and also giving them information of what your kid needs and where they are with technology is very useful. Just like Colleen, yeah, she did it. She hit it right on the nail, Colleen.
Oriana, is there anything you want to add on, or?
Just as I stated before, just making sure that you meet with the parents, you get the parents on board. And the biggest part with virtual learning, I think, is just you having that connection with the parent, right? We can't just rely on the student to do everything, right? Because they come to school and they rely on us for support. So when they're at home and they're virtually learning, yes, they're still relying on you as a teacher, but they don't have you physically there. So now you as a teacher have to rely on the parent, right? You have to get in contact with the parent. You have to have that communication in order to get them in touch with the related services providers. And like Janelle and Colleen said, making sure that the tools and the technology is taught beforehand so that they know how to navigate, and then also setting that structure and that schedule so that students know when they're supposed to be meeting with who and when.
Right. And I do know many districts, they're looking for ways to allow services such as OT, PT to come to the building because it's such an individual need. So, check with your districts to find out how your district is going to operate or provide those services. So as I close and summarize, I kind of want to apologize because I didn't set the tone correctly. Because I should have mentioned that most of our questions as we were planning this was focused on resource placement, in-class support placement, and LLD placement. So I do apologize if some of you are on the call this evening. We're looking for more for our severe and multiple disabilities. But I would say this: I think some of our panelists touched on it, and they were, and they really did a good job of driving the point home of finding ways to check in with our students. And I think that was a repeated theme, utilizing our technology to, whether it's the breakout rooms or creating some individual time to speak with families or students to check in on them. And I think that's the way to work with our students with severe disabilities, and as well as leverage the support that we have in the classroom, whether it's the TAs or paraprofessionals, and utilizing those breakout rooms. So that severe and multiple disability, that could be a series of itself. And I think we might want to talk about that with my colleagues, but I do apologize. I should have set the tone more clear at the beginning. But as I summarize a little bit more, I think that something that hit home with me, and again, all the things you said, have a lot of notes down on my paper here. So thank you. Something that stood out to me is that we all got to do the research, and we know that as educators, but we got to do our research and continue to find different tools that are out there, because there's something is out there that fit the needs of you and your students. And notice I said you as well, right? Because we all have different, we all have a different level of comfort with technology, right? So we need to do our research and figure out what works best for you as well as your students. The other thing is communication. And I think that Oriana touched on about being willing to go above and beyond. And that's what I look for in a teacher. And I know many of you on the call, or all of you on the call, are just that, because that's why you're here now, right? So communication is key. And I think, whether we're virtual or traditional, we all know that that's vital. And that's, we need that more than ever now, right? Make sure that communication is there to help fill those gaps that we have. So, again, I just want to thank all of the panelists. Outstanding job. I know I'm walking away. I definitely want to find out about CAMI as well. I want to learn more about Nearpod and that emoji. So I'm going to look into that. And so I'm excited about some things that I've learned tonight that I could bring back to my staff. And that's what this is all about. So thank you all for sharing your knowledge and taking some time out to speak to our fellow educators. And thank you, fellow educators, in tuning in. So Beth, we're going to turn it back over to you so you can close out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Solomon. Wow, that panel was incredible. I am, like Dr. Solomon just said, I'm walking away with 100 ideas, and I'm also just completely blown away by the ingenuity and commitment and dedication and creativity of these educators. So I want to thank Dr. Harrison and Dr. Solomon for being our moderators this evening. So many thanks to Oriana Nolan, Colleen Begley, and Janelle Powell for sharing their expertise, which, as they've shown, is deep. I want to thank Jessica Hunston, Samantha Bruno, Arjun Nair, and Corey Weber for managing all of the technology for this session and the chat. And a special thank you for this session's planning committee of Jessica Hunston, Sam Bruno, Oriana Nolan, Monique Coleman, Dr. Nicholas Solomon, and Dr. Judy Harrison. And thanks to Rutgers GSE for their support of this series. Please join us next week for our final session, Anti-Racism in the Remote Classroom. For access to video and resources from this session and from the previous 3 sessions, you can click on the link below this YouTube window. Thank you. That's all for tonight. Take care and have a great week.